A grand castle stands under the sky as the setting for a truly terrifying legend. A story about a wicked princess whose silhouette is framed by flowers whose acts of wickedness were passed down through generations. Because after her fiancé was stolen, she was consumed by jealousy and used forbidden magic to summon a powerful demon, revealing her tear-filled face as the infamous and incompetent witch Princess Bergiane. But the truth is she wasn't the worst witch of her era, nor was she talentless or incompetent. Instead, she was a pitiful princess with magical talent who was simply exploited, and in her current life she is insulted daily while hiding her magical talent. Which is why this family dinner is being disturbed amidst shouts of her being a disgrace to the Roble family. As her mother berates her for lacking basic education and magical skill, questioning why she even exists, and screaming that it would have been better if she were never born. While the girl Laviange sits quietly and composedly, revealing to herself that the infamous Villainess Bergiane was her past life and only she knows the truth. Her brother Mikhail then interrupts, telling their mother to stop during a meal while still pointing out Laviange's poor grades. And he gives her a sharp look, reminding her to be aware of who her fiancé is. While he sips his wine, he resents having a sister who chooses ignorance over her duties. Then her stepsister Sienna speaks up, telling her father to stop the others, and she pretends to defend Laviange, saying she is making an effort. Laviange glances over at her, while Sienna internally laments how pitiful it is that the insults have started again, ruining her delicious meal. Laviange then reflects on her third life and her memories from the past too, feeling that with over 100 years of total life experience, it's more convenient to live peacefully as someone talentless. Because her past life as Princess Bergiane was tough and infamous for trying to destroy a country. So as a reaction, she lived her next life as a peaceful Japanese woman until she was 86. But it seems fate wouldn't allow her to continue living so peacefully. As a chart explains her reincarnations from Princess Bergiane to a Japanese old lady and now back to Princess Laviange with magical talent. So she resolves to live this third life as a talentless and powerless person to find peace once more. Which is why she endures the twisted emotions from her stepsister and mother. And her brother's coldness and her father's indifference are no big deal. She then politely thanks Sienna for her concern, while Sienna internally mocks her pitiful stepsister. But Laviange cleverly points out that Sienna's tilted face reveals an ugly expression of pity, shocking Sienna as her mother comforts her. And the situation escalates, as the mother explodes with rage, calling Laviange a useless and hopeless child with a terrible personality. Mikhail just sighs at how unpleasant the situation has become. Then their father slams his hand down, declaring that's enough and telling the two troublemakers to leave. The mother and Sienna are shocked by his command. Then the mother asks Laviange to leave, but the father claims he is talking to the mother and Sienna. The mother and Sienna are shocked by this, as he sternly says meals should be quiet and he will expel anyone who causes a commotion next time. The mother tries to argue she only raised her voice because of Laviange, but in a flash of magic they vanish, leaving Laviange looking at their empty seats. Realizing her father used powerful teleportation and soundproofing magic to remove them. Her brother Mikhail then tells her to continue eating as she pleases, and Laviange happily agrees, since this is the first time she can enjoy a full meal in peace. Because she believes delicious food is an essential part of enjoying life. And she considers her father's indifference a form of equality. After finishing her meal, she thinks about the delicious dessert and plans to secretly request it again. Later she is seen in a log house where she was banished as punishment, but she's grown to like it for its peacefulness. Its only flaw is that it's old and gets cold. Suddenly she hears footsteps approaching, and her stepsister Sienna bursts in, yelling about how cruelly she's been treated. Laviange calmly asks what's wrong and invites her to sit, but Sienna angrily accuses her of ruining her dinner with their father, while Laviange just smiles serenely, which only makes Sienna angrier as she complains about her mother's fury. The story then reveals Sienna is actually her cousin who was adopted after her parents died. And Laviange thinks to herself how Sienna and her mother are like noisy little kittens. Sienna calls her disgusting, but Laviange calmly says it's nothing. Sienna then slams the table, demanding to know what happened and telling her not to play dumb. She screams that her father kicked them out because of Laviange and threatens to tell Lord Schwa at the academy tomorrow, warning that Laviange's reputation and engagement are now in danger. Sienna then smirks viciously, saying Laviange should suffer until she herself becomes Lord Schwa's fiancée. But Laviange calmly reminds her that the king is the one who decides such matters, which infuriates Sienna as she realizes she can't control the outcome. And she furiously questions why Laviange is acting so high and mighty when she is supposedly powerless. And she calls her a disgrace to the household because of her poor grades. Laviange then thinks to herself that she silenced the noisy girl with magic just as her father did. As Sienna continues her tirade telling the uneducated and talentless Laviange to give up on the prince. And she compares her to the villainous Bergienne who interfered with her fiancé's true love. Laviange internally notes that she's heard this speech so many times she has it memorized as Sienna slams the door. And the door finally breaks from all the slamming which Laviange finds unfitting for a lady. She then reflects on the idea of interfering with the prince's true love seeing him with Sienna. But she finds the thought of being in love with him far too sweet for her tastes. Suddenly her small sacred beast casquette appears on her head asking if they should just kill him. Laviange is startled by her companion Castjon's sudden murderous suggestion. But Castjon complains that the stupid prince and his mistress are always picking on his beloved Lavi. Laviange reminds him they got killed in a past life for saying the same thing about royalty. Though she does admit he has a point. As it's revealed her fiancé Prince Schwa is a descendant of the man who defeated her in her past life as the villainous Belchanyu. But the official history might not be the real truth. And knowing this truth Castjon is seriously pissed off and can't accept it. Which Laviange finds incredibly adorable. Castjon then compliments the scrunchie she's wearing. And she smiles revealing she wove strong protective magic into it stitch by stitch. Making Castjon wag its tails happily in response. Laviange then gushes over how irresistible and fluffy her companion is. Until Castjon warns her she's acting like a pervert and threatens separate rooms. Laviange quickly apologizes and Castjon says it's fine. As the little beast flies off to bed telling her to hurry up. The next day she fully expects the second prince to make a scene after hearing from her stepsister. And she finds it strange to be engaged to someone who feels like a grandson to her on the inside wishing she could just call it off. All she wants is to live happily and peacefully with Castjon and the others. But at school the second prince Schwa Robnia approaches her calling her name. He's with his group in Sienna and he looks furious. He immediately accuses her of treating Sienna terribly calling her rotten to the core. But Laviange just smiles offering advice like a doting grandma and says his face is quite unfortunate. Which leaves the prince shocked and enraged calling her a bastard. He then lunges at her yelling at the incompetent person not to mess with royalty. But Laviange calmly questions if it's appropriate for royalty to yell and glare while with a woman who isn't his fiancée. Which stops the prince and his group in their tracks as he remembers to maintain his image. While Sienna is shocked that Laviange is talking back so rudely. Laviange then states she doesn't appreciate being falsely accused of something she doesn't remember doing. And as she turns to leave, the prince grabs her wrist. He accuses her of being talentless, mean-spirited and enjoying tormenting her sister. His anger grows as he yells at her for ignoring his words and bullying others despite her own incompetence. Laviange then asks if she may be angry now since he's using brute force on a lady. He shouts back in disbelief and she reminds him that for now she is his fiancée and his accusations are completely off the mark. She looks down at her wrist with a pained expression. As his grip really hurts. One of his companions tells him to let go. His grip is forceful and tight. The companion Baines again tells Schwa that's enough. And after a tense stare down with Laviange, he finally releases her hand. Laviange looks at her arm noticing it's starting to swell. But the prince just calls her an exaggerate. Her arm looks bruised. So she asks to go to the infirmary because it's her dominant arm and she has a joint class tomorrow. The prince panics thinking she'll be seen as a villainess and refuses to let her go. But she calmly asks why he's making a victim's face when he's the one using force which she calls cowardice. This stuns the prince and his companions into silence. And Laviange thinks to herself that the noisy brat has finally quieted down. She then asks what he wants since she has been harmed. And she declares they will settle this with compensation from his personal assets. Which shocks Sienna who can't believe her stepsister is demanding money from the prince. But Baines tells Sienna to be quiet since Laviange offered a straightforward resolution. Laviange then turns to Baines Ash the third prince and asks, "Who am I?" He's confused by the question. So she clarifies that she is Laviange Rober, one of the two legitimate heirs of the Rober ducal house and the appointed fiancée of the second prince. She then advises Baines as a knight in training to consider who his future master is and act accordingly. She then bids them all farewell hoping for a swift handling of the matter, walking away and leaving a stunned prince behind. With a confident smile on her face. She just hopes this doesn't become a bigger hassle as she plans to live as an incompetent person until the end thanks to her 3 lifetimes of experience. The prince and his group just watch her go, looking completely bewildered and angry. Laviange thinks to herself that she had hoped to earn his disfavor to please her sister, but things didn't go as planned. Sienna fumes in the background, irritated by her talentless stepsister, and she vows to have Laviange exiled from the country as Laviange feels the negative emotions directed toward her. Sienna's eyes burn with hatred as she internally declares her absolute loathing for her stepsister. Thinking about how Laviange's arrogant and irritating attitude makes her want to drive her out of the country, especially since she believes her to be completely without talent. What a terrible situation. The scene then shows Sienna crying to Lord Schwa, claiming that it's true both she and her mother were driven from a dinner party all because of her stepsister. Lord Schwa comforts the weeping Sienna, telling her not to cry as she insists the whole ordeal was just so painful for her. He then curses Laviange's name, declaring her a terrible noblewoman just as the rumors suggest for making her own sister cry. As Schwa vows to punish the talentless fool himself, Sienna thinks to herself that he is the only one she can truly rely on. Sienna internally celebrates, convinced that Lord Schwa loves her and not Laviange, believing their engagement is a loveless formality that will surely lead to her stepsister's shock when the prince gets angry with her. She had expected to see her stepsister in a miserable state, but something else happened entirely. Instead, Laviange calmly proposed to settle the matter right there and announced that compensation for breaking the engagement would be paid from His Highness's personal assets. Sienna's face contorts in utter shock, and she runs away from the scene, yelling in disbelief at what just transpired. She can't comprehend how Laviange remained so calm and unshaken, even after being insulted by her beloved fiancé and physically injured. She had expected to see her stepsister's face filled with despair, but instead, another girl named Ella asks Sienna where she is going. Sienna furiously declares that she is going to find her brother, and that she needs him to scold their stepsister for her awful attitude, demanding that Ella back her up. She aggressively presses a frightened Ella for confirmation, as Ella hesitates and follows behind her. Meanwhile, Laviange walks down a school hallway alone, clutching her arm as she finds the lingering pain to be quite annoying. She reflects on the fact that she has never been hurt this badly before. And while she has been insulted plenty of times with words like talentless and wicked, she feels this time they went too far, which finally made her angry, leaving her to wonder what she should do next. She decides the best course of action is to go to the infirmary for treatment, reasoning that using her own healing magic would be troublesome later, especially with the matter of compensation and her reputation as incompetent. She arrives at the infirmary and knocks on the door before entering, where a voice tells her to come in. Inside, a mysterious-looking man with dark hair and glasses sits at his desk. Laviange smiles to herself, thinking that he is just as mysterious as she expected. She recalls occasionally running into the school doctor at hallway corners and how he always gives her an uneasy feeling that isn't quite arrogance. The doctor notes it is her first time visiting and asks what is wrong, so she explains that she hurt her arm and he invites her to sit for an examination. Upon examining her wrist, he identifies marks from a tight grip and diagnoses a simple sprain that doesn't require magic to analyze. He then asks her what happened to cause the injury. Laviange gives a creatively vague response about a collateral accident caused by an entanglement of passionate emotions, which the doctor finds to be a strangely trivial-sounding reason. He prepares to use healing magic on her right away, but she asks him to wait. She requests that he write a medical certificate for her first, explaining it will be useful as insurance for the future. The doctor observes that she is surprisingly shrewd for someone rumored to be incompetent, understanding that evidence is necessary when dealing with the royal family to prevent a cover-up. He then asks if she's truly okay with being called incompetent, to which she replies that it doesn't bother her. She explains that if being seen as incompetent means people will treat her lightly, then she can simply keep her distance from them, prompting the doctor to note that she must be alone often. Laviange simply smiles and says that she finds being alone much more peaceful than being with people she can't feel at ease with. She notices he looks at her as if she were a pitiful creature, but she insists that she genuinely means it, and the doctor says the treatment is finished. He hands her the completed medical certificate and advises her to take it easy so the injury doesn't relapse, and she thanks him sincerely, expressing her gratitude that he treated her properly without prejudice despite her reputation. After she leaves his office, the doctor is left in thought, wondering to himself if she can make that kind of face too. Laviange walks away feeling pleased that she has secured the medical certificate as a form of insurance. Elsewhere, her brother is in his study, when he is interrupted by a frantic knocking at the door. Sienna bursts in dramatically, begging her big brother to stop their stepsister. Her brother tries to calm her down, but she insists he listen to her story. She claims their stepsister fearlessly demanded compensation from Lord Schwa in front of everyone, and that she pleaded with Laviange to withdraw the demand out of consideration for her position, but she refused to do so. Clinging to her brother, Sienna cries that the family's reputation will be ruined and begs him to scold Laviange. Internally, she schemes to make her brother, who already dislikes Laviange, hate her even more, believing it is only a matter of time before their stepsister is kicked out of the house for good. Her brother listens with a cold and unreadable expression. As Sienna internally celebrates her perceived victory, convinced her brother is now angry and that the talentless Laviange will finally learn her place. Sienna is shown in a state of distress and inner turmoil. As her brother Mikhail asks her to explain what she means about Laviange demanding compensation from the second prince and questions if she was even there. Sienna tearfully confirms she was present and claims she was terrified by her stepsister's harsh words. She insists that Laviange was deliberately acting in an exaggerated way to attract attention because she is desperate to maintain her engagement to Schwa-sama. As Mikhail listens silently, Sienna continues her frantic explanation, claiming Schwa-sama was offended and that the entire family's reputation is now at risk of being ruined. Mikhail then turns to Sienna's companion, Miss Ella, and asks if what Sienna said is true, since she was also a witness to what happened. Ella appears nervous and can only stammer in response. Feeling the pressure, Ella finally confirms that a reward was indeed requested, but before she can explain the context, she is cut off. Sienna quickly shouts for Ella to stop, fearing she will reveal the whole story, and calls out to her brother for support. She grabs Mikhail's arm and urgently demands that he go make Laviange take back her words and apologize immediately, adding that her stepsister has already gone home. Sienna firmly states that a matter like this must be resolved without delay. Mikhail lets out a sigh and reluctantly agrees that he will go ask Laviange about the situation, which seems to disappoint Sienna. He then sternly warns Sienna that she also needs to reflect on her own words and actions, cautioning her not to assume he will remain oblivious forever. Sienna is completely shocked and begins to cry, asking her brother what he means and why he is blaming her. Mikhail decides that in any case, they must talk to Laviange first, while Sienna internally seethes, vowing to crush her stepsister who she sees as an eyesore and insisting that Laviange is the one who needs to change. Meanwhile, back in her log cabin, Laviange cheerfully contemplates how to use her compensation money while considering fixing her broken door or perhaps just saving the funds for an emergency. A knock on the door interrupts her thoughts, and she wonders who it could be since visitors other than Sienna are rare. When she asks who the me at the door is, the visitor identifies himself as her brother, Mikhail Roble. She tells him to come in and is surprised to see him since he has never visited before, immediately suspecting that Sienna told him something as he looks extremely displeased. Laviange internally reflects on her brother Mikhail, the 19-year-old heir who was raised with strict discipline and is known for being highly responsible. She believes he despises her for her carefree way of life. She muses that he is like a cool character from an Otome game whose cold attitude is picturesque and reveals he is part of the reason she now lives in the log house. Feeling more like relaxing than admiring him, she wishes he would leave soon and longs to cuddle with her companion Kastjan, who hides when others are around. She concludes his visit must be about the incident at school that Sienna told him about and decides to handle it quickly so he will leave. After welcoming her brother, he ignores her greeting and instead asks why the door is unlocked, worried a burglar might have broken in, to which she cheekily replies that since it was broken, it's not her fault. She explains that the door broke after someone was opening and closing it violently the other day. Mikhail immediately assumes she is blaming Sienna, but Laviange calmly adds that it was also likely due to old age and being used countless times. She then directly asks him again why he has come to visit her. He reminds her that she was ordered to live separately as punishment for bullying her stepsister and making her cry. Mikhail looks stunned by her words. Laviange points out that the punishment was given right after Sienna first arrived in their home. He realizes with dawning horror just how many years have passed since then and questions if that punishment is seriously still in effect. She recalls his own declaration that she was to stay there until one of them was forgiven and finds it amusing that he is so surprised by his own words. Mikhail accuses her of being stubborn and asks why she didn't just state her objections at the dinner party instead of escalating the situation. Laviange smiles brightly and asks if he is implying it's her fault, then playfully asks if she has ever brought up anything about him before. She points out that she isn't bothered by the situation at all and wonders why he is being so aggressive about it. Suddenly, she comes to the conclusion that this must be his rebellious phase. Viewing it as her duty as an old lady on the inside, she decides to indulge his youthful conversation, seeing it as a cute stage of growth. She cheerfully tells her brother that it's not his fault he's acting this way and that it's just because of hormones, which leaves him completely shocked and confused. Villainess then realizes that the scientific knowledge of hormones and their effect on aggression during puberty probably doesn't even exist in this world. She dismisses his confusion with a warm smile, saying it's nothing and that she just felt happy to see her dear brother growing up so healthily. Mikhail is left sweating and utterly bewildered by her strange behavior. He perceives her lukewarm gaze as being like a grandmother watching her grandchildren grow, while Villainess momentarily worries that he has figured out her true identity as a woman over 100 years old. Getting back on topic, she tells him to stop staring at her like that and asks him to state his business, prompting him to compose himself and address her. He asks if it is true that she demanded compensation from the second prince, and she confirms it is, saying it should be obvious since she was injured. Mikhail is shocked that she would do such a thing over a minor injury and warns her that the prince is furious and her engagement could be annulled. She calmly replies that she simply requested compensation for her twisted arm. She then asks if he was particularly bothered by her actions, which takes him by surprise. He finally loses his temper, shouting at her to not mess around and to think more about her position in the family. He lectures her that her engagement to the prince is necessary and that she should not worsen her impression. He tells her to bring any future complaints to him first instead of taking them directly to the prince. Villainess calmly points out that they are hardly on speaking terms, so it's unreasonable for him to get angry over matters they never discuss. Mikhail is left speechless, muttering, "Damn it," under his breath. Villainess observes that she is now being lectured by her own brother and gently chides him for using language that is improper for a nobleman. She reflects on how the emotional distance between them grew significantly after Siena's arrival and how his inaction made her own engagement feel like a lie. Her brother coldly states that the matter has already been discussed. Villainess realizes that the information he has gathered is incomplete and must have come from a biased source. She asks him directly who told him about the compensation fee, already knowing it was Siena who framed it as a disgrace to the family's honor. He confirms that he heard it from Siena but also verified it with others who were nearby, which Villainess acknowledges makes sense. He continues his lecture, telling her she made a wrong decision and should have discussed any issues with their father or with him, the heir, as a proper noble lady should. Villainess' hand clenches into a fist. Mikhail raises his voice, yelling that it's because she lacks the proper education of a duke's daughter that she makes poor decisions and is looked down upon as talentless and incompetent. Villainess coolly states that her judgment is not wrong and that since she has decided to live as talentless and incompetent, he shouldn't be bothered if she gets hurt. She then decides there's no point in continuing the conversation. She starts to laugh and calls their talk a very insightful discussion, which makes her brother angrily ask if she is making a fool of him. She tells him to calm down, asking if he's getting heated up again in another rebellious phase and offers him a drink for his anger-induced thirst. Completely enraged, Mikhail yells, "Don't mess with me," and lunges toward her, pushing her down to the floor with a grunt of pain from her. He then stands over her, clutching his chest in shock at his own violent outburst as she looks up at him from the ground. Mikhail stands in shock and regret over his violent actions. From the floor, Villainess tells her older brother that she didn't mean to make fun of him and was just surprised by the hit, thinking the pain in her arm means it might be broken. She asks him to please help her up as he panics over her injured arm. He immediately rushes to her side and apologizes profusely, and helps her to her feet. Now in her bedroom, he apologizes for entering without permission and asks to see her arm. She winces in pain as he gently takes her arm to inspect it. He tells her she doesn't have to hold back if it's painful, and she admits that it hurts. He then begins using healing magic to mend her injury. As he works, she reflects that her cheek doesn't hurt that much from his slap. She reasons that he must have held back a little and that her arm was injured from hitting a bad spot when she fell. The magic glows as he carefully heals her arm. He asks if she can move her arm and she confirms it's fine, so he notes that only her cheek is left to heal. He then gently places his hand on her cheek, using his magic once more. The healing light envelopes her as he finishes the treatment. After helping her sit on the bed, he asks if she hurts anywhere else and apologizes again, but she says she's fine. She then tells her brother she doesn't want him to make such a pained face, but he looks away and asks what kind of face he's even making. She tells him he looks like he's about to cry, and he confesses that he only meant to check on the matter with the prince but lost control and resorted to violence. In response, she gives a genuine and warm smile. He is visibly surprised, realizing that this is what her true smile looks like. She gets flustered by his reaction and asks if that smile was different from how she usually smiles. Mikhail then asks why she doesn't acquire a proper education and instead accepts being called talentless, to which she simply replies that it's because she is. He tells her that's not true, pointing out that her manners and etiquette are perfect, even if she doesn't realize it. And I myself, he says, have never called you talentless and incompetent. They look at each other as the weight of his question hangs in the air. Laviange realizes that while her brother often told her to get an education, he himself has never actually mocked her for being incompetent. She thinks that his straightforward way of caring for her is hard to understand, and she doesn't feel anger toward him like she does with the prince. Even when he raises his hand, he shows immediate regret. And so she is shocked, but she isn't angry. She felt that despite his harshness, there was at least some consideration for her in his actions. Mikhail tells her he doesn't believe she lacks talent and that he wants to know her true feelings. He says he wants to talk with the real her. Laviange's soft expression hardens into a distant one. She pushes his hand away, saying it's difficult because her relationship with the family is already broken. Shaking her head, she tells him that restoring their relationship is something she's no longer interested in because it's far too late. He argues that she hasn't truly escaped her upbringing just by running away from it, and questions if she truly thinks she can escape her life as a noble lady. She looks at him coldly and asks if he really thinks she was raised and treated like a noble lady after seeing the shabby room she is forced to live in. She asks if he can even imagine her daily life, from how she gets to school to how she spends her nights, leaving him able to only apologize. Softening her tone, she admits that even so, she could always feel his concern for her. She finds his clumsy yet sincere self to be quite endearing, even when he can only apologize. And that, she reveals, is the reason why she is still here. She explains that as a noble lady engaged to the second prince, she simply follows along without objection despite the absurd arguments. Until today, she says, she has endured and held back everything. She then presents him with a medical report, and he realizes that Sienna exaggerated the events and that this wouldn't have happened if the prince hadn't intentionally twisted her arm. He grips the report in his hands. Overwhelmed, he apologizes to her again, truly sorry for what she has endured. He tells her it is understandable if she can no longer accept the situation and asks if she wants to annul the engagement that many other noble daughters envy. Laviange clarifies that considering her family's political standing, she simply does not actively seek to annul it. Realizing he has misjudged her, Mikhail asks what she personally wants. She bluntly states she'd like to bury her fiancé and have a direct annulment. She feels he's an obstacle and not worth her emotions, adding that her stepsister and the prince suit each other perfectly, so she doesn't understand why she must be the one to marry him. And yet, despite her terrible reputation for being talentless and unable to use magic, the engagement shows no signs of being annulled. Her brother quietly agrees that she is right. This is why she personally doesn't wish to annul it yet, as her blood and position still hold some utility even if she is seen as powerless. As long as she doesn't know how she'll be treated after an annulment, she concludes it's safer to leave things as they are for now. With a new understanding, Mikhail asks her if she is only pretending to be talentless and incompetent. Upon entering the room, Mikhail finds Laviange standing by the bed and wonders aloud if she is just feigning her incompetence and lack of talent. His thought is then shown as a memory of a visit to Laviange, where he decided to ask her about a thought that had crossed his mind after hearing Sienna's side of the story. In a flashback to that visit, Laviange counters Mikhail's accusation, stating she never claimed to be incompetent or talented and that she simply acts and lives as she pleases. Mikhail then reflects on how he and others arbitrarily created an image of her, realizing that his own perceptions were distorted. Laviange, pleased by his change of heart, says she'll be happy if he personally speaks to their father about the engagement again. Mikhail then thinks to himself how foolish he was to resort to violence with such a physical difference, now that he has calmed down. He bows his head in shame, apologizing for his misjudgment and for lashing out at her, regretting that if he had just talked to her properly he would have understood her true feelings. Mikhail continues to apologize, adding that his pride prevented him from immediately correcting his actions after he realized his mistake, but Laviange cuts him off, stating that too many apologies start to feel insincere. He groans in frustration, apologizing again, and asks how he can make it up to her. Levianj tells him to pay for her atonement from his personal assets. Surprised, Mikhail asks if she means payment in kind, and she winks, confirming she means payment in kind, not money. She points out a small, detached log house and says she wants him to pay for its repairs. Mikhail suggests she should just return to the mansion instead, but Levianj refuses, explaining it's too late for that and that she finds the log house quite relaxing. Mikhail smiles softly as he tells her to make sure she properly repairs it. He adds that he will repair it and she can ask for any furniture she'd like, and Levianj says with a laugh that she'll take him up on that offer. She immediately requests a pure white, 3-seat, fabric-upholstered sofa, and asks if he can also put up protection and anti-theft magic, which makes him wonder if something had happened to her in the past. Mikhail asks her if that's all, telling her not to hesitate to ask for anything else, but Levianj says there's not much she really wants, just the repairs, specifically for the leaking roof and door lock. Mikhail then thinks about how he despises himself for letting his sister live in such a place, feeling guilty. She mentions that the roof was previously repaired by Garufi, a man who serves as the royal family's shadow, but a new spot started leaking the other day. Mikhail's eyes widen in shock as a new realization hits him. He mutters, "shadow," in disbelief, feeling like he's heard something he wasn't supposed to hear. Levianj proceeds to explain that Garufi-san, a 31-year-old woman, is a secret shadow of the royal family who used to spy from the ceiling and now lives a single aristocratic life. She continues, detailing how the shadows would regularly peek in through the ceiling and fix things. Mikhail's confusion and disbelief grow as he just blankly responds with, "I see." He then frets in his thoughts, questioning how she could be on such good terms with a shadow, a professional snooper, and worries that she's revealing too much personal information to a surveillance target. Levianj playfully pats him on the cheek and tells him to be more concerned about himself as a young lady of marriageable age. He acknowledges that he understands the situation and informs her that she will return to her original room from now on. Levianj then laughs, realizing he's trying to get her to return home, but he warns her that their mother and Sienna will become worried. He sternly thinks to himself that he certainly can't send Levianj into an environment like that. He calmly explains there's an empty room in his own quarters, and she can use it from now on. He thinks about how the wing he resides in has been used by those inheriting the estate for generations, and that it's not unreasonable to be concerned about his sister's safety. He then explains that his room is in a separate wing from his mother and Sienna's, and the servants there are exclusively his. Mikhail confirms he will also place protection and anti-crime magic on the room. As she begins to leave, Mikhail asks what she's in charge of for the next day's joint training with their classmates. Levianj replies that she will be in charge of camp preparations and cooking, while he will handle the strategy and combat. Mikhail tells her to retreat to where the senior students are if anything dangerous happens, as there are stronger magical beasts this year. He then looks at her with a gentle expression, telling her to get some rest. Levianj thinks to herself that while she knows this peace is temporary, the role she crafted for herself as a family member requires pure devotion, and she bids her brother good night. Mikhail resolves to hold back his emotions from now on and to stop looking at things through his own tinted glasses. The morning sunlight shines through the log house's windows as a bird chirps outside. Levianj sits at the table and smiles to herself, reminiscing about the previous day and how she never expected to hear such kind words from her brother. She grins and excitedly thinks that she is lucky she will also get separate training now. Levianj is surprised by a knock at her door and asks who it is, and a voice replies that it is Mikhail. Mikhail asks her how her arm is and if she slept well. She replies that her arm and sleep are both fine, and then she asks him the same. She thinks about how long it's been since she last greeted someone in the morning, and that this is the first time she's had an early morning visit from someone other than Sienna. She asks him if he has already had breakfast, and he replies that he hasn't yet, noticing that she is having homemade cooking. Levianj describes her meal of spiced meat sandwiches and green bean and egg soup and offers to prepare a plate for him. Mikhail, intrigued by the homemade cooking, asks if it's okay for him to join her. Suddenly, the door to the log house bursts open and Sienna appears, looking flustered and upset. Sienna's eyes are wide as she anxiously looks at Mikhail. Mikhail looks back at her with a stern expression. Levianj notes that it is unusual for Sienna to come to the log house in such an unkempt state. Mikhail then asks Sienna why she is in such a hurry. The noisy morning begins with Sienna's arrival, who bursts into the log house and angrily confronts her older sister, Levianj, demanding that Mikhail listen to her side of the story instead. A blank page. Sienna yells at Levianj, accusing her of being cruel and of just defending herself in front of their brother. Mikhail calls out Siena's name, telling her to stop dodging the issue, while Laviange tries to calm Siena down, promising they can talk after she and Mikhail return from joint training. After hearing about the training, Siena becomes quiet and simply states that she understands. As the door closes behind her, Laviange is surprised that the sound is so quiet. Mikhail apologizes for the trouble that followed him to her place, but she dismisses his apology, stating that she is used to Siena's behavior. Laviange playfully thanks him for the apology and promises to prepare his breakfast right away. The morning is peaceful as they eat their breakfast together. Laviange takes Mikhail's hand as they depart for the academy together in a carriage. She stands outside the prestigious Royal Academy, looking back at the magnificent building. She reflects that the Royal Academy is attended by nobles and royalty, but also by commoners who can afford to pay a certain amount of taxes. She further explains that students can study in various departments, such as business administration and witchcraft, according to their majors. They arrive at the academy grounds, and Laviange reminds Mikhail that they are supposed to gather there. Other students are shown excitedly chatting among themselves. Laviange spots a familiar face and asks about her team, addressing him as Lord Loren. A team leader, Ralph, raises his hand and greets her, saying he looks forward to working with her, and Laviange's team members introduce themselves. Ralph introduces Kartika, a magic division student and the third daughter of a lower noble family, who works as a seamstress and is responsible for support and healing. Kartika smiles and comments on the nice weather. Ralph then introduces Loren, the eldest son of a merchant family who is a sub-leader in the magic division and responsible for gathering materials and meat from magical beasts. Loren greets Laviange and says he looks forward to working with her, and she replies in kind. Ralph then introduces himself, a second son of a lower-ranking noble who is an adventurer and the team leader. He explains that his role is to be in charge of all the meals and minor rear support. A teacher, a noble, interrupts the introductions to announce that leaders will now draw lots, and that they will have 4 team members. The teacher explains that the subjugation mission will be decided by lottery and that second and fourth year students with the same number will be paired together, and the students watch as the numbers are matched. Another leader is shown wondering who his team of number 9 will be paired with, and a student in the background has a number 2 above his head. Laviange's team is shown standing together, as Ralph is shown to have drawn number 9. Another team leader, Enrique Milti, spots Laviange and says he recognizes her. Enrique rudely interrupts Ralph, wondering in his mind if he only sees him in his vision as a follower of the second prince. Laviange greets Enrique Milti, and he asks if she would like him to introduce his team. Laviange thinks to herself that she has to entertain Enrique because they are the only 2 of the same status, but she would rather ignore him. He condescendingly tells her that her incompetence is unchanged, as she couldn't even become a team leader for a team in Group D. Enrique then insults her further by asking if she isn't ashamed to be the fiancée of the second prince, but Laviange just says she doesn't feel anything at all. He keeps talking, but Laviange just stares at him, internally thinking that his polite speech disappeared quickly and that she has no interest in him. The leader of the other team, a woman with a kind smile, steps forward and reminds Enrique that the joint training involves danger and asks if she can give her greetings and introduce their team composition. Enrique becomes even more enraged, asking how dare she repeat the same thing over and over again and accuse her of making a fool of him. The kind-looking leader reminds him that the subjugation of magical beasts is real combat and asks him to refrain from meaningless conversations for the sake of the team. Other students in the background comment on how cool the lady is and wonder if she's the famous Miss Mikiara from the fan club. The kind leader, Mikiara, suggests to Ralph and the others that they should be the ones to apologize, and Ralph agrees, telling her to introduce their team. Enrique looks at Laviange, saying there's no point in asking about the characteristics of Class 2D. He turns to Mikiara and yells at her, saying that it doesn't change the fact that they are useless. Laviange then introduces Enrique Milti as the second son of one of the 4 great duke houses. Enrique angrily tells Laviange not to call him by his name, calling her and her group failures from Class D, but she just smiles to herself. Laviange pretends to innocently ask if Enrique is calling them failures because he's sad that no one calls him by his name. Mikiara, a little flustered, tells Enrique to not mind her, but he angrily asks what is with Laviange's smile. Mikiara introduces herself as Minacure Uzaira, the sub-leader, and asks them to call her Mina since they are on the same team. She introduces her teammates, Pechulim and Madikana, as the son and daughter of the Marquis. A boy on Mikiara's team, Rim, says that since their status and abilities are different, they can call him by his first name for now, but not after the training ends. Levianch's team nods their heads and says that they understand. Mikiara explains that while her team specializes in management and wave magic, for this time they will also handle healing and rear support. She tells Levianch that her team has greater magical power than hers. However, she adds that her team has no real combat experience outside the academy, and she hopes that they will have a positive influence on each other. Levianch thinks to herself that Mikiara is refreshing and an ideal and wonderful knight, as the teacher instructs the students to grab their luggage and head to the teleportation circle. Mikiara asks Levianch if they can go together. Mikiara apologizes for her team leader's behavior, but Levianch tells her that there is no need to apologize. Mikiara says that while it may be presumptuous to say this, she would like Levianch to be more aware of her position as a noble. She goes on to say that as a member of the Uzaira Marquis family, which protects the frontier, she must have some thoughts about her behavior, and Levianch says that she understands what Mikiara is implying. Levianch then calmly states that it's better to be labeled as tactless and simply convey the current situation rather than to put on airs and endanger the group during real combat against magical beasts. Mikiara is impressed by her mature response, and Levianch smiles. Another student watches them from afar with an unreadable expression. The students step into the teleportation circle. As they are teleported, Enrique glares at Levianch and condescendingly calls her a mere dropout. He sneers and tells her to at least try not to drag them down. Levianch smiles, stating that the magic circle has a mechanism exclusive to their team and that she shall punish him. With a chilling smile, Levianch says that she will see how this turns out and that for now, she will enjoy the training. A giant, centipede-like magical beast rears its head out of the ground in front of Levianch and her team. A teammate, Cass, yells that they are going to trap the magical beast. The magical beast lets out a horrifying cry, and Cass stares at it with a look of pure fear. Another student, Loren, trips and falls while running away in fear. Levianch raises her hand, preparing to cast a spell. A beam of light shoots down from her hand, hitting the ground. The light creates a perfect hole in the ground, and the centipede falls in with only its head sticking out. A student named Rim prepares to attack, yelling that he will burn the torso section. Rim and his teammate, Mikiara, slice off the torso and head of the centipede, and then kick the head to the right. Rim and Mikiara attack the centipede with their swords. The centipede's body is sliced through. Mikiara and Rim land blow after blow onto the magical beast. Mikiara lands a final blow to the centipede. Rim and another student cheer as they kick the centipede head away. The centipede's body lands with a wet splat, and the students are in awe. Levianch asks her teammate, Ralph, if he can use wind magic to sink the body into the hole, and he replies to leave it to him. Mikiara tells them that she will also help. The centipede's body begins to sink into the hole. Mikiara and her teammate watch as the body sinks. Levianch smiles with a hint of malice as she says that now they just need to add a bit more fuel. She then asks Kartika if she could seal the hole with her magic, to which Kartika happily agrees. The students get excited about her cooking and ask how long it will take for the meal to be ready. Levianch smiles and admits that they were not hunting monsters but just gathering ingredients for her to cook, calling them honest and eager, which she really likes. Ralph tells Levianch that the centipede's monster wards should be collected and maintained immediately, and she replies that it's a big help as she hands him a magical tool. She asks Ralph and Mikiara to set up the wards in the same area as usual, as centipedes often appear in pairs, and they thank her and agree to help. They all nod their heads in agreement. Enrique sneers and says that he supposes she is useful after all. Levianch then sits down on the ground, taking out her supplies. Enrique scoffs, asking if she's offering to help with the maintenance, but tells her he'd rather she not dirty his shoes. He then demands an apology from her for getting his shoes dirty and says that a magician like him shouldn't have to deal with that. Levianch smiles, saying that a job like that is perfect for a noble lady with low magic power who can't even use spells properly. Enrique's teammates tell him to calm down, and he angrily asks her what the subjugation was about, and she says he should apologize before doing anything with such a magical tool. Enrique's teammates also ask why Levianch is giving orders when she is not the leader, and Enrique replies that she is a replacement. Levianch pretends to be surprised and asks what he means. Enrique tells her that even if she's a noble lady, she should follow instructions from senior students and leaders. Enrique's teammate says that he just followed his leader's orders and asks if she was unable to grasp the situation. Levianch thinks to herself that she assumed they were focused on assessing the situation, and wonders if she was mistaken. She thinks that calling magical tools just things And having such a lack of awareness of danger when the situation demands quick action is just pathetic. She sighs and tells herself to just leave it be. She tells herself that something unexpected happening is normal in the forest, and besides, it's just training. Laviange then thinks about how she wants to say a mountain of things but should keep quiet, as crushing the budding growth of the young is not a good thing. Laviange excitedly thinks to herself that she wants to experience student life again for the first time in a century, and that she is really looking forward to the overnight camping trip tonight. Enrique continues to mock her, calling her a dropout and saying that her team is full of bottom-rung nobodies who are only good at monster hunting, and warns her not to get too carried away. Laviange tells him that she doesn't think her team is inferior and that he's just lacking ability, which makes him tell her that he's sure she understands they are not inferior to her. Enrique mocks her again, saying that she can only use basic lifestyle magic and relies entirely on magical tools, and that there's no way she could get through this safely without help from her upperclassmen. Michiara tells Enrique that she has a point, and that his actions go for the other second-year students as well. He tells them that all the credit will go to them, so even if Laviange thinks she played a big role, it won't matter. Another student, a girl named Imako, says that it was Lady Mina who finished off the beast in the end and asks if that is right. Another student is shown using a dark element mental resonance spell on Laviange that specialized in mental manipulation. The student then thinks to herself that her magic is sloppy and it doesn't affect her at all. Laviange just stares blankly, telling herself that she can't understand what the younger person is saying and that her words don't make any sense. Enrique then wonders if they should all set aside their egos and focus on getting out of the forest. Michiara and her teammate agree with him, saying that trying to stand out with pointless pride or vanity is a nuisance. Enrique smiles and asks if she understands now, calling her a malicious noble lady who enjoys tormenting her little sister. Laviange replies that she has no time for such petty hobbies, and her teammate thinks to himself that she is still trying to talk, but he will just ignore her for now. Her teammate Rim tells her that even if it's just in name, she is still a noble lady, and wonders if her mana is so low that Michiara's magic worked too well on her. Enrique smiles mockingly, calling her pathetic. Laviange smiles and says she wasn't listening as she is focused on her task and can't entertain him right now. Enrique's teammate says that's enough already and calls her a wicked woman, while Laviange tells them to go on and enjoy themselves. Another one of Enrique's teammates, Imako, asks why Mina is acting so high and mighty, and asks what she is doing to the princess. Enrique's other teammates look shocked, and Rim, with a wide-eyed expression, asks if they all haven't noticed. Enrique then thinks to himself that this is not normal and wonders what the reason is behind Mina's caution and the presence in this forest. Rim explains to his teammate, Nilti, that as the leader and a noble he has no right to complain because he was just following orders. Michiara, the sub-leader, angrily tells Rim that what he is saying is nonsense and that he has no right to complain. She asks him if he seriously thinks this is their usual training. The centipede's head is shown again, and Michiara says that no matter how anyone looks at it, something abnormal is happening and asks if they haven't noticed. Her team members are shown looking anxious as Michiara says that the princess is a valuable force. She confronts him as he draws his sword, and Laviange remarks to herself that things are getting tense. Enrique's teammates, shocked by his actions, apologize for him and try to calm him down, saying that he's too carefree, and this conflict is unnecessary. Another teammate tells Enrique to leave them alone until the task is finished, thinking that arguments sometimes bring people closer. Enrique's teammates ask her if she is alright, and he tells his teammates to leave the princess alone as he argues with Michiara about why they should be the ones to apologize. Laviange takes a small step forward. She thanks Ralph for his concern and says that nothing has changed, implying that her situation is still the same. Enrique yells at Michiara, saying that she's still a cadet knight and has no right to give him orders, as she is a noble and he is a noble too. Michiara tells him that now is not the time for this and that he needs to start understanding the situation. Another student thinks that the upperclassmen must be hungry, which is making their irritation worse. Laviange thinks to herself that high-ranking nobles arguing so intensely is certainly unusual and that her kids look uneasy. She then thinks that she doesn't care about their squabbling, but it's a different story if her cute kids are getting anxious, and smiles to herself, guessing she has no choice but to intervene. Ralph places a hand on her shoulder and asks her if she is fine, and she says that she is. Enrique approaches her and asks her if she came to complain or to attack them with the magical tools in her bag. Michiara's team members are shocked by his words and the presence of the magical tools. Laviange laughs and says how aggressive he is being, and another student realizes that since he and the princess are the same age, this must be what they call a touch-and-go situation. Another student thinks to themselves that these two are going through rebellious phases. A student from the other team tells Mikiara not to worry because this isn't her fault, and that it's just hormones at work. Laviange approaches them and asks them what they mean, and why they are looking at her with such a warm gaze. She thinks to herself that she's glad she explained it to them because these kinds of things don't get through unless you say them out loud. Laviange then says to herself that the greatest enemy is hunger, and a full stomach is a must-have item for soothing rebellious irritability. She then asks Kartika to make a hole in the lid, and Loren agrees to handle the finishing roast. Ralph says that he will adjust the fire with wind magic. Laviange then tells Ralph to spread the fire evenly using wind and Loren to use high heat, and they both agree. Enrique yells, asking why lowerclassmen are acting on their own, and tells them to wait. He yells that it is a problem and that if their reckless actions put them in danger, they will be the ones in trouble, as they are the upperclassmen and high-ranking nobles looking after them. Ralph tells him to watch his mouth and says that if he doesn't like it, he can leave the beast barrier and go elsewhere. He glares at Enrique with a fierce expression. Ralph says that it infuriates him to see his comrades made a fool of, and that he's heard plenty from the graduates. He explains that Enrique's foolish teammates didn't even question the situation or try to stop him from ordering the use of magic that could bring death to the whole team in a place this dangerous. He accuses Enrique of dulling his comrades' ability to make individual judgments, and says that as a leader of Class D, he has decided that he is unnecessary. Enrique scoffs and calls him a fool, asking if he thinks he wouldn't understand. He then points at him and yells that he hasn't even seen it and tells him not to get cocky, saying that Class D lacks both experience and brains, and that in a student training ground, there shouldn't even be life-threatening dangers. The scene shows Ralph glaring at Enrique. The scene is labeled The Box Garden of Venomous Insects. The students are shown with a look of shock and fear on their faces as Enrique stands there with a confused look. Enrique tries to argue that they wouldn't be let into a place like that, as this is a joint training session organized by the academy. Laviange thinks to herself that she realized there was a possibility they could end up in this forest because she aims to become a mage in the future. Ralph reveals that if they scan the area, they would find several centipede-class insect-type magical beasts, and that the only place in the country where such insects crawl around in abundance is the Box Garden of Venomous Insects, which is classified as Danger Level A. He continues, stating that the area is a habitat for mostly large magical beasts, most of which are poisonous and rated at least Danger Level B or higher. Enrique and his team are in disbelief, asking if it is really the Box Garden of Venomous Insects. Ralph says that it is not a lie, and that anyone in this forest who clings to petty claims about lineage or being an upperclassman and endangers their lives because of it is unnecessary. Enrique's teammates, shocked by the revelation, have a look of despair on their faces. Enrique clicks his tongue in frustration. Laviange thinks to herself that the name, the Box Garden of Venomous Insects, comes from the fact that it is a small forest sealed off by barriers and magic. She thinks that the forest is essentially their garden, as a wide variety of large venomous insects roam freely there. She explains that it is certified as Danger Level and is the most dangerous. The ranks are shown in a pyramid from A to F, with F being the weakest, and it is revealed that the centipede from earlier is classified as a B-level threat. Laviange says that especially the carnivorous ants are dangerous enough to be rated Danger Level A, even alone, but if they swarm, they are classified as S, a disaster-class threat. She adds that adventurers can also be ranked as S-class. She reveals that there are stories that even the forest of venomous spirits once held an S-class beast, which is exceptionally powerful. She states that because it's such a dangerous forest, originally, only seasoned A-rank adventurers or higher, or A-rank parties, are permitted to approach it. She reveals that it is easy to enter from the outside, but leaving is nearly impossible because the barrier ceiling is extremely solid to prevent the most dangerous magical beasts from escaping. Laviange thinks to herself that the magic circle for transferring to the training grounds had been tampered with to send them to this forest instead, and that the upperclassmen team, except for Mikiara, had assumed it would be their usual training. She smiles as she looks at the upperclassmen, who have now grasped the situation, saying that their mood has become like a funeral. Ralph looks at them with a stern expression. He asks Enrique and his team what they will do. He then asks them how they will survive. The upperclassmen stare in shock and terror, and Ralph wonders if they will accept reality and have the resolve to face it. Loren happily agrees to strengthen his body with magic and throw the severed centipede, as instructed by Ralph. The severed centipede head flies through the air. The centipede head almost hits Enrique's teammate. The centipede head lands in a bush. Enrique, annoyed and flustered, wonders aloud why he, a noble son, has to do something like this. He grumbles to himself, trying to push the centipede head with his shoe, but it's slimy and slides around. Laviange thinks to herself that everything seems to be going smoothly with her team and the upperclassmen, since they've chosen to work together. She explains that in response to Ralph's question about how they will survive, her team is preparing to dismantle and cook the centipede. She asks Kartika to help separate the poison, organs, and flesh, and Kartika happily agrees, saying that choosing to cooperate was a wise decision since the food problem comes up first. Laviange notices that Kartika has gotten much better at butchering. Kartika blushes and thanks her for the compliment. Laviange internally thinks about how honest and adorable Kartika is. Kartika points at a part of the centipede, exclaiming with a sparkling expression that it's crab, and a large crab-like appendage is shown. Laviange thinks to herself that it's a crab, a well-known luxury ingredient from her previous world, and that the rich aroma of shellfish and the sea is wafting from the centipede. Laviange winks and tells Kartika to go for it. Kartika excitedly agrees. Laviange compliments her on a job well done and suggests they divide up the work, instructing her to spread the herbs on the shelf and place the butchered meat on top. A student is shown butchering the centipede and placing the meat on a shelf. Laviange says that they are done and just need to wait for the meat to cook. Michiara approaches her and asks why some of the meat on the racks is covered with herbs and some isn't. Laviange says that's a good question and explains that the herbs are for their antibacterial properties, so they are laid under everything, while other herbs are placed on top of the items they want to infuse with aroma. She explains that anything they don't eat will be dried overnight and used as preserved food, and that the smoky aroma will stimulate their appetite. Michiara, intrigued, asks about the purpose of the cuts between the shell and the flesh at the four corners, and Laviange explains that this helps the meat shrink and makes it easier to remove cleanly. Michiara expresses her newfound understanding, but asks why a noble lady like Laviange knows so much, as it seems like knowledge she shouldn't possess. Michiara continues to question her, saying that the knowledge doesn't seem like something a lady like her should have, especially since she has heard that Laviange ran away from her duties. Laviange thinks to herself that she should just use her go-to-stock phrase at a time like this. She thinks that while Michiara's tone is extremely polite and she means no harm, she still shouldn't reveal her personal circumstances. Laviange apologizes to Michiara, saying she can't talk about that. Ralph steps in and tells Michiara to stop throwing strange accusations or imposing her values on Laviange when working together. Ralph glares at Michiara. Michiara, looking ashamed, apologizes and says she didn't mean it as an accusation. Laviange tells her not to worry and that she is free to judge her however she wishes, since it is true that she has abandoned her duties and acted as she pleased. Laviange then says that if she had to say one thing about it, she tells Michiara that the knowledge she possesses was taught to her by someone from the royal family's shadows and asks her to refrain from prying any further. Michiara is shocked and thinks to herself that hearing it like that, it's understandable that someone might mistake it as something unusual, and she thinks she doesn't want her to hate her, as she feels like she's a precious grandchild. Laviange thinks to herself that she doesn't want unnecessary digging into the memories she has from a life beyond this one. Ralph looks at her with a concerned expression, and she realizes she has let her wicked face show. Ralph says that he has already decided that they'll be camping there tonight since both Loren and Kartika are starving, which Laviange thinks is wonderfully intuitive of him. She smiles and says that her role remains the same as always, to handle the cooking while Loren prepares the fire. Laviange then tells Ralph to collect some soil from around the centipede as it can be used to ward off or attract magical beasts of the same or lower rank. Ralph asks her if they should hand over the magic stones and materials they harvested from the centipede, since the noble sons requested them. Ralph then says that he is sorry if it seems like he is rushing her, but they can't expect an immediate rescue, and they will talk about the future after they eat. Ralph reveals that in a worst-case scenario, they could be stuck there for up to 6 months until the barrier can be re-established on the Robnia kingdom side. Laviange thinks that 6 months isn't that long for them as long as they have good food, but she can't say the same for the others, who might not be able to endure and just die for some reason or another, which is a grim outcome. She tells Ralph that he's already thought a lot about this, but that he's trying a little too hard, and he says that a venomous garden is just that kind of place. Laviange says that even if they dwell on who sent them here, they won't find an answer, and that it would only fuel suspicion and paranoia, so she'll just ignore it for now. She says that they will get out of there alive with all 4 of them. Ralph thinks to himself that a cooperative girl from the 4th year isn't part of his team and that anyone besides those he can coordinate with reliably would only be a burden, as he judges the situation strictly. Laviange says that she understands that it was his decision as a leader, but that doesn't mean they need to act together. She warns him that this is a place where lives are at stake, and if he takes action without deciding by his own will, whether it's due to coercion or a request, it will bring death to himself or his comrades. She tells him that just because he's the leader doesn't mean he needs to carry the burden alone. Laviange tells Ralph that he's still just a 16-year-old boy. She says that, of course, the pressure would be heavier than ever before, as he was suddenly thrown into a forest full of poisonous bugs and told to be the leader. She asks him if it wouldn't be fine if everyone just shared the responsibility, and that once it comes to this, everything becomes their own responsibility. She says that she may run from responsibility when she feels like it, but she has never run from all of it. She states that the descendants of the royal line and the 4 great ducal houses must take full responsibility in times of crisis. She gently tells him not to overthink it and that they should just fill their stomachs for now. Laviange smiles and says that once he's full, he will feel more at ease. Ralph agrees and says that she's right. They stand together, looking into the forest. Enrique stands in the background, staring at them with a look of contemplation.